All right, it's 10:30. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know some folks will be coming in from some of the other panels. So good morning. I'm John Polofchek, and I want to thank everyone for joining me today. And what I hope is a lively discussion around Navy shipyards of the future. And just so a little bit about this, I'm going to introduce the speakers. I'm going to have an opening scene setter, and then get into some panel questions. And I'm going to stop in the middle after a series of questions to take audience interaction, so we can have a little bit more of a dialogue. So as you go, think about questions that you might want to ask after each little section, and we'll have a little Q&A as we go, and then we'll save time at the end for questions as well. So joining me today are Navy and industry leaders of organizations that are on the cutting edge of Industry 4.0 technologies and processes, such as artificial intelligence, digital design and production, the Internet of Things, smart factories, cloud computing, and the application of these technologies to modern manufacturing. The Navy is poised to significantly modernize its public shipyards and update critical manufacturing infrastructure. These new capabilities might deliver greater productivity and data-driven insights to commanders, such as predictive maintenance, more optimal maintenance scheduling. To have this discussion, I have with me today Rear Admiral John Corca, Commander Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, and the Navy's 45th Chief of Civil Engineers. During his 36-year career, he's commanded NAVFAC Pacific, NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic, a U.S. Navy Mobile Construction Battalion, and served as Commodore of the 31st CB Readiness Group in the Pacific. I've Mr. Bharat Amin, Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer at HII, America's largest military shipbuilding company with a workforce of 44,000 people. As CIO, he is responsible for the company's information technology and digital strategic direction with a focus on cybersecurity. In addition, he's focused on governance and oversight of key digital technology partnerships and digital innovation across HII. We have Mr. Bernard Ibrahim, Director, Manufacturing, Industry, and Supply Chains for Microsoft. In his current role, Bernard leads transformational engagement with Microsoft's strategic customers in the manufacturing and supply chain industries. He has more than 20 years of experience in the manufacturing and energy industries, having held a variety of commercial and operational roles at companies such as GE Digital, GE Ventures, and the Ford Motor Company. Mr. Ian Bolton, who's a Senior Director, Digital Transformation, Aerospace and Defense for PTC. In his current role, Ian is responsible for helping government and industry aerospace and defense clients achieve digital transformation success through the adoption of technologies such as the Industry 4.0 issues I set up front. Ian is a former military maintainer who served in the UK Royal Air Force. Mr. Sven Dormani is a principal in the consulting services practice at Ernst & Young. He has more than 25 years of international experience in business transformations and performance improvement. Currently, he is EY's Global Supply Chain Solutions Leader for the advanced manufacturing and automotive sector. He focuses on developing strategy, re-engineering processes, and implementing sustainable solutions, and has extensive experience leading digital transformations and implementing Industry 4.0 technologies for global Fortune 100 manufacturing companies. And just a little bit about myself, I'm a retired Navy Admiral. I was previously the Vice Director of Logistics on the Joint Staff and had the illustrious opportunity to be moved from the Joint Staff at the beginning of the pandemic, go over to Health and Human Services, but Vice President Pence asked me to stand up a supply chain task force in support of his COVID efforts, so I did that during my last year of service. I've been at EY for approximately a year. I'm going to provide a scene setter before we get into the panel, because I think it's important to understand the context of the conversation that we're going to have. I wanted to set this strategic context on the importance of our four Navy public shipyards. Our four public shipyards are strategic assets critical to national security, responsible for the maintenance and modernization of nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carriers. The Navy depends on these shipyards to maintain and return combat-ready ships and submarines to the fleet and sustain readiness of these ships, which remains a top Navy priority. These shipyards were originally designed and built in the 19th and 20th centuries. As the Navy shifted to nuclear power and more modern ship technologies, the Navy shipyards have not been holistically optimized and upgraded facilities, equipment, or supporting technologies over time. Instead, the upgrades were pieced together for each new ship class, and over time, I categorize it as being more of a Frankenstein, put together in pieces. Pieces added here and there, and the result has been an inability of the shipyards to keep up with demanding results in higher costs, lower productivity, significant schedule delays, and growing risks. Now is the time and opportunity to design and modernize our shipyards to create a 21st century capability that can keep pace with commercial technology and innovation. As I've stated earlier, leading manufacturing companies are investing in Industry 4.0 technologies and processes. Things like the Internet of Things, smart factories, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and a wide use of 5G. These new capabilities can deliver greater productivity, data-driven insights, and potentially more optimal maintenance processes for the Navy. How might the Navy adopt Industry 4.0 processes and innovative technologies to make our shipyards capable of working for the next 50 years? That is what we are here to discuss with you today. Our shipyards are critical national security resources, and war in Ukraine has only highlighted the importance of getting this right. The Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Plan, or SIOP, is an opportunity to reimagine maritime maintenance, rethink the ability for what you must do for maintenance, maybe even get to a different kind of maintenance process. I'm going to explore this in three key themes. Impact of the fourth industrial revolution, really, if you think about it, what it is and what does it mean. Keys to leading this transformation, how do you get it done? What's the prize for winning? What is the return on investment for the Navy? So with that, I'm going to pass to the first question to Rear Admiral Korka to help me continue to set the stage a little bit. So Admiral Korka, what are the problems facing the shipyards today, and briefly describe the shipyard modernization effort to help put the issues in context for us?
Okay, John, thank you for that question. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. Is the mic on? So everyone can hear me, okay? So thank you for allowing me to say a few words today. I'm honored to be sitting at the table with some key leaders in the industry today. So I'm actually here to also learn. As I look at the audience, I see a lot of old shipmates, some industry leaders that I do work with, so it's good to see you. I think the first question that I would put out there, and I'm going to put it in different pieces, but if you were to close your eyes and you say, what does a world-class shipyard that doesn't build ships but modernizes and maintains ships, what does that look like? Okay, that's the one thing that I would pose to everyone. Do you know what it looks like? The reason I say that is because I was part of the team that built the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and our first quest was we were building a brand new world-class medical facility. And the first question is, what does world-class look like? And once you get a lot of different stakeholders to agree upon that, which was not easy, with a lot of doctors, that sort of set a course. But let me just throw out a few things. 1767, 1800, 1891, 1908. Those are the dates that we established our shipyards. The Norfolk Naval Shipyard, our oldest shipyard, 1767. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Maine, not to be confused with the Norfolk Naval Shipyard in Portsmouth, 1800. And then, of course, Puget Sound, 1891, and Pearl Harbor, our newest, 1908. So from the surface, you would say that the Asian infrastructure is a problem, that we may not have the capability for future platforms. And do we have a challenge with resiliency? And when I use the word resiliency, think of cyber. Think of impacts of climate change, tsunamis, sea level rise. You think about power, backup power, ability to sustain operations to maximize productivity. That all exists. So that is one problem set. But I really do believe that a larger problem set is that we really have a complex ecosystem at the shipyard. An ecosystem that looks at plants and operations, processes to include supply chain processes, manufacturing processes, and people when it comes to skill sets. And all those three items are intertwined by IT. Everything that John mentioned. Okay, so as we look at the modernization and the recapitalization of our infrastructure at the shipyard, it is more about synchronizing and modernizing our ecosystems of the shipyard. In the past, we've taken a bifurcated approach that we looked at facilities, we looked at manufacturing, but as we take a step back, the commitment is there. We do know what our North Star is. Okay, our North Star is about readiness and lethality for the United States Navy, is to keep ships, our platforms at sea. And the way to do that is through effectiveness and a modernized shipyard that we can improve our operational availabilities. So in a simple term, the problem does exist. I think we understand it, and now is developing the plan to put it in place in a holistic approach. And that's what SIOP is looking at. It is not easy. There are many people, many stakeholders involved with this, many processes. And how do we take a step back and look at that and take advantage of this fourth revolution?
Admiral Corker, thanks for that overview. It's not, I'm sure it's not lost on any of us of how complex that problem set is. So with that, if I can get to some of the first theme of like, what is Industry 4.0? So to the panel, describe what is the fourth industrial revolution and what does it mean to your organization and those who you serve? And so Ian, first to you, I know you have a perspective and I think you may even have a slide or two and maybe a short video to help set the stage of what is Industry 4.0.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hopefully my audio's okay. I got a couple of slides here I just want to share with you to give you a visual indication of what we think about when we think about Industry 4.0 and digitization of the shipyards. So PTC is an industrial software company that specializes in Industry 4.0 solutions, and we work with manufacturing customers from all over the industry verticals, from automotive, medical device, aerospace and defense, and process industries as well. When we think about digitizing a production process or a work environment, often we think about acquiring a digital model or a digital twin of that environment and then mapping out the industrial processes that take place in that environment. Some of the reasons you do that are to bring technology to bear on those processes to gain greater efficiency, whether it be remote assistance or the ability to telepresence into an environment and have a subject matter expert be on the shoulder of the person that's performing that work. So within my company, we have this tool set called the Spatial Toolbox, which lets you map environments, digitize them, and then optimize them for use for IoT applications and mixed reality. Those little cubes that you can see moving about there, those are what we call spatial anchors. And so on the floor, what you can do is you can initiate a remote assistance session or a telepresence session where a subject matter expert, let's say you're working on a motor or a pump or a valve in the bowels of the ship, maybe even a reactor, who knows, and you need an engineer to give you some advice right there and then. So by establishing these, what we call pop-up metaverses, you can effectively have someone don a pair of augmented reality glasses, such as a HoloLens, and see what you see in the environment that you're working, collaborate with you and give you advice in real time for the problem that you're trying to solve. So that's just one example of a use case. But then we talk about, well, why aren't the shipyards or the Navy using this technology today? Well, there are some procedural and organizational barriers that have to be overcome. It's about organizational change management. Some of the common ones that you see are, for example, in the IT that's available in the shipyards, the connectivity. It's not always a place where you have good network connectivity or even Wi-Fi is allowed. And then there are a lot of security regulations that require policy in order to adapt this technology. So, for example, in many places in shipyards, you can't bring cameras or recording devices. Well, a lot of the computing equipment that we use today to establish these types of business processes requires wireless connection, or it requires cameras. That's how a lot of mixed reality devices actually operate. So I think there's some work to do in terms of the regulations that allow these types of devices into the workplace. And then there's work to do in terms of making broadband connectivity available everywhere it's needed, such as the 5G initiatives and smart bases, smart shipyards, things of that nature. And then a couple of things, I think it was Captain Omar who asked me, well, why would we do this? You know, is the juice worth the squeeze? In industry, companies that implement this technology usually see double-digit growth. From an engineering standpoint, it reduces their ability to get products to market. So that for the shipyard might mean reducing the time cycles it takes to process a ship through its updates or its repair and overhaul. We also get greater yield and less waste in the manufacturing industry as well. So that might mean a reduction in scrap or a reduction in rework or quality escapes for the shipyards. And then the last one is an improvement in operational efficiency. So therefore, the ability to do more work with the same amount of resources or the same amount of people, which hopefully would help the shipyards process their workload faster through the facilities. And with that, I think I'll...
Thanks, Bernard. Thanks, Ian. For another perspective, Bernard, from a Microsoft lens, tell me about Industry 4.0.
Thanks, John. We get asked this a lot, and really, I try to simplify it for either the experts or the uninitiated. Is the opportunity to provide your people in operations with the best data that you have in your organization at a more timely way, because they're often flooded with data, and being able to make the best decisions. That's really what we're trying to get to here. And this whole fusing of what traditionally was separate silos of information technology repositories, systems of record, and the operational technology that are the tools that people use in operations have really been separated for a long time. And so this is just the beginning, really, of us collecting all this information and then really serving it to the people who need it when they need it. And that's what we're seeing is the real driver in improvements in safety, improvements in productivity, improvements in quality is getting your people better information that you already have. It's just they don't have access to it. It's disconnected. It's not clean. It doesn't make sense. So that's really the challenge that we're seeing and the real benefit.
Thanks, Bernard. Great scene setter. So a follow-on question, and for the audience, I'm going to stop here after this to see if you have questions on this first theme. If you could imagine a transformed Industry 4.0 shipyard of the future, what does that look like in 2050? And what capabilities might that give the Navy? So Admiral Corker, in 2 minutes, if you can give me what's in your head for 2050.
I don't know how many people are familiar with Tom Friedman. So Tom Friedman has written a few books, The Lexus and the Olive Tree, Hot, Flat, crowded. In one of his books, he talks about, there's a 4-page section that's written in italics that talks about the Internet of Things, AI. This book was written like 5 years ago. And he starts talking about, imagine when you go to your house. And so by the time you go to your house, your garage door opens automatically. You go in, the temperature's set correctly. You go to the fridge and you notice that there's not something to drink, but yet the doorbell rings and someone's already dropped off your milk, okay? And so when you look at, Siri, if you look at Amazon.com, that sort of tells you what you need to buy, when you need to buy it, or how often. When you look at total efficiency and productivity, I think that's what this 4th generation is about. But I would also tell you that I was at Cisco 2 years ago, and we were talking, and one of the senior executives said, "Hey, this is a good day." I'm like, "What's so good about today?" He goes, a month ago, 96.4% of the things that have yet to be connected has gone down to 96%. And he goes, look at the opportunities that are there. Okay, so I do believe that this cyber-physical 4th generation is where we need to go, but it's not going to happen overnight. And with the Navy, the sensitivity of security is absolute, as mentioned earlier with cyber. And so 2050, I want to have a plan in place that we're executing, that optimization is taken into account, that it is modern, and that we have built infrastructure that can prepare us for the future. Okay, our infrastructure is going to be adaptable for the future. And so I really don't know what it looks like, but it's not what it looks like today. And it's faster, probably, okay, less people, and a lot more dependency on the digital domain.
Admiral, that I can kind of see it. Bharat, at HII, you're leading a transformation. What's in your head for 2050?
Yeah, so you said 2050, right? So you got to imagine. A quote from Albert Einstein comes to mind. Imagination is more important than knowledge, right? For knowledge is limited to all we now know and understood, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there is ever will be to know and understand. So I'm going to imagine a few things. We are doing quite a few things I'm going to share later. So imagine safety is number one. I start with problems. What are our problems we're trying to deal? We want to make sure our employees are safe every day. So number one is safety. So how can I imagine about safety? Just imagine there was a chip on a helmet or somewhere where I can see a shipbuilder is walking, fallen, so I can do some tracking, or maybe comes on a collision course of something's moving that a person doesn't know. So that's an imagination. Other challenges we have is, think about multiple hull configurations. We have multiple vehicles under construction simultaneously. We have finite space, like Admiral mentioned, that you need a space management, and you're trying to, schedule changes happen, and you got to move things around. Talk about supply chain, right? Imagine a supply chain constraints, not only that we have today, but for critical components, and how that can change your schedules. And then final challenge is about resource optimization, people, and also the equipment. So when you think about those challenges, my imagination says we need to have smart yard. And Newport News, we have a program there called Smart Yard. At Ingalls, we have a Shipyard of the Future program. And our third division, Mission Technologies, is in a ramp of building 100% digital manufacturing center of excellence for unmanned in Hampton, Virginia. So those are the kind of things that are happening. But imagine if we can have connected workforce. What can we do with connected workforce that connects with our infrastructure, equipment, facilities, welding machines, all of that, right? I'm imagining more. Imagine there were smart sensors that's collecting big data that allows you to create insights and make decisions faster. Imagine we can use AR, and we are using AR for last 2-3 years, but you can bring digital and physical spaces together to solve problems instead of going to drawings and trying to figure out what's wrong here. Imagine if you have a digital twin of whatever you're building, your shipyard or a product, that we can have a connection between what we are seeing that's working, not working. Imagine there's a 5G around everywhere, because that's what I believe. Mobile devices, a path of wireless connectivity, and edge computing is what's going to be needed. 50 years is too far out, but I can say many of these things will happen in the next 10 years.
Great. So before I transition to the next theme of leading this transformation, I'm going to pause to see if there are any questions from the audience on the opening. We do have a microphone. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Reed McAllister, Greenpoint Marine. I want to start with remember, and then we'll go into imagine. All right. So remember, back in World War II, we couldn't bring our ships back. We had to go far forward and build a capability out there. In one atoll, we had over 600 ships in there to be able to repair, refuel, rearm, and make all that happen. So as we talk about the future, and that future could be within 90 days that we would need to start going in if we surged into some World War III type of scenario. What is that 4.0 or future that we're going to build far forward in order to repair, refuel, rearm our capabilities that we have far forward, just outside of the second line, if you will? How are we going to do that, and what are we envisioning? What might that look like?
That's a great question. Thank you. I'm going to pick the panel here. So from HII perspective, Bharat, as you're managing this transformation, any thought on helping repair forward?
Absolutely. So, one of the things, I joined HII, and I joined at Newport News Shipbuilding. So I was there for 5 years as a CIO. And one of the biggest programs from digital transformation perspective that we kicked off 5 years ago, actually 6 years ago, was integrated digital shipbuilding. And all the component that we think about in terms of what we wanted to do there was, can we have our shipbuilders do visual work instructions? Because right now, when we have our shipbuilders carrying a lot of paper drawings and going to those places where they're trying to now say, what do I need to do? So visual work instructions kind of way of saying, here are the 5 things you need to do in this order, and here are all the designs with you on your mobile device. So that's one approach to it. The other one, a part of the is in visual build management in terms of how do we bring Lego blocks of big ships that we bring together so we can assemble with proper schedule, proper resource, skills, et cetera, so we don't have schedule changes and stuff like that. And then final was work management. So we are doing this for new ships, but we are also doing it for when they come for refueling and overhaul. So that's how we are trying to solve a problem at Newport News Shipbuilding. Ingalls have similar things we are doing, where we are taking panel lines and bringing designs right onto the panel so it can do a laser cut without having to kind of manually do things. And so time and accuracy is a big factor. And last one, I would say an example would be welding. Welding is our core competency in the shipbuilding. And if we can perfect that in a way, right? So we have taken an approach of our welding equipment that it's mobile, that collects data, that collects the quality, arc time, non-arc time, quality of the data, and then we correlate that data with the welder itself, and we can do predictions of all of that going forward on what we need to do. So those are some examples that we use today.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next question. So, sir?
Yes, my name's Sheldon Johnson. I'm a systems engineer with Naval Systems, Mechanical Systems, retired. My question is, we have so much data in the world today, billions and billions and billions of pieces of data. I used to analyze data, and I was always concerned with what am I going to do with all this data? Where is it coming from? Is it just people inputting data and telling me this data over here is a number on the pressure. What am I going to do with that? The people that do the data input need to categorize it and tell me what it means so I can make informed decisions on what I need to do. That is where the confusion link is in my mind. There's too much data. People are overwhelmed. They don't know what to do with it. So they sit there and look at it, and more data comes in. And so everybody is more and more confused each day with the data. So when you hire people, here's the question, the crux of this question. When you guys and girls hire people to work in your groups, are they vetted to make sure they understand what to do with the data and how to analyze it, how to present it so it's meaningful to the user? The user is the customer. You're the customer that need to know when you make a decision, is it based on valid fact data? Period. That's the end of
Okay,
my
so let me,
little talk.
Sven, I'm gonna let you do this from an industry perspective, because I know you're all about data and analytics.
Yeah, so that's
Just
a great,
a real quick answer.
yeah, a great question. The key is understanding what problem you're trying to solve, and then what data do you need for it. You make a really good point that there is a flood of information and data coming from different sensors, different sources. But if you're just starting to collect it, you're not going to solve the problem. The key thing is, what's the business issue? What are the critical elements of data do I need to solve that problem? And then collecting, cleaning, analyzing that, converting it into decision support. I mean, literally this week, example, working with a company that gets 7 million rows of data from one piece of equipment a month. They're overwhelmed. And they still can help improve the supply chain flow despite all that data. And the problem is, they don't know, they haven't figured out how to use it. They don't have the business rules around it of when do I know I have a problem? And when you set up the business rules and exceptions, what's the workflow? What is somebody supposed to do with that? So what you need is a combination of clean data, which gets layered on with analytics that tell you what's actually going on, and then business processes and rules that tell you if this happens, this is what it's telling me, and this is what I'm supposed to do. So I want to give a very short, crisp answer. That's the key, because you can collect all the data you want. If you're not using it and processing it, it's not going to help.
Sven, you said three things: collect it, clean it, and utilize it. What was the last one?
Well, collect it, clean it, analyze it, and then decision support.
That's
Business rules.
I think that's the theme. So let me move to the next one. Keys to leading this transformation. To the panel, from your perspectives, how do you get started on Industry 4.0? And how may you think about this transformation? So if I can get some short answers to that question, how do you get started? Bharat, I know you're on this journey. How'd you get started?
So I would say that, we started this journey 5 years ago. You have to first get your house in order in terms of, you always look for what are the best practices, as Admiral mentioned, what is the best in class. So we look for what are the best practices in Industry 4.0 that are out there. We look at the formats and frameworks around it, and we developed our own framework about what that maturity was going to look like. And we said we're going to target at level 3 because you can't go from 1 to 5, right? So it's a maturity path. So that's what we targeted on and said, what are the things are we going to do? So I described the problems we were solving. So I can say in 2019, we were the first shipyard, Newport News was the first shipyard that we enabled 5G. Even when the devices were not out, but infrastructure was ready. And our goal was that we want to have mobile device, we want to be able to do AR, VR, training, all that in the yard that's over 500 acres, right? So we didn't want to have to deal with a lot of wireless issues and things like that. So that was one. So the other one, I would say that supply chain, critical components is a big deal for us. Sometimes critical components lead times is more than a year. So imagine you have to order something a year ahead. And one of the challenges that we are trying to address that is through 3D printing, additive manufacturing. So we started that process 4 years ago, and I believe our first component that was printed, 3D printed, that Navy approved, and it's being tested on aircraft carrier today. That was done in 2019. So these are some examples of what we are doing in terms of HI journey perspective. I would say that if you want to get started, first you need to lay out what vision, what is the North Star, what problem are you trying to solve? Data is a big deal for us, right? So when we have laid out our data strategy in terms of how do we collect data, how do we cleanse data, and how we're going to format it using the tools that are standard, industry standard tools, and that creates insights for us to make decisions.
So Sven, I know from an EY perspective, you are helping people in these transformations. What are you seeing as how people get started?
Yep, it's a great question. I think the first thing you have to do is really understand the severity of your pain points and the total spectrum of your pain points, and have a little bit of a roadmap. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And I think this is where we see a lot of companies and clients get stuck around the wheel, that they are chasing perfection. And the key is picking off a few areas to get started and creating momentum, because part of it is about change and driving change. Where we see the most success is where you don't try to push incremental improvement, but where you try to drive step change. One example, we're actually cutting lead time of a Fortune 100 company by half for marine transportation. That is, not happened for them for last 30 years. But you have to push the envelope and think through what does a step change look like. And then once you have a goal in mind, start small, do a proof of concept, do a pilot. Don't try to bite the whole elephant in once. Once you get a few proof points, then you can start to converge. But the key is step change. Think about step change and transformation, not incremental improvement, and start small with your North Star and your roadmap that supports you to get there.
Great. Bernard, I know you have a Microsoft example. If you could just give me a quick summary.
Yeah, several of them were going through my mind, and I really like what Bharat said about imagination. What we advise our customers, wherever they're at, is to get started. This is a game of inches, and it's a long-term incorporated practice you have to be committed to. You have to have the imagination. And I advise, any of our customers, their executives, are deciding, like, when do I get started? How do I get started? There's a faith component here. You have to believe that going down this journey and investing these people and the money and the time is actually going to improve your operations. You have to go on that on faith, because the early days are really, really hard. And it's not about the technology. We actually have now better technology as consumers than most manufacturers do. And this is like really the first time in history that that's happened, where the consumer technology is far superior to what the people that are building these ships and operating in these construction sites have in their hands. So we suggest pretty simply is, assuming there's a commitment, be realistic. This is not about technology. This is about changing culture. That's the hardest part about it. That's your biggest challenge, is this is a transformation of your culture, very much like all the other practices around safety, being number one, a safety culture, a quality culture, a continuous improvement culture. You got to build in on top of that, and this is what we're asking people to do, is build a data mindset, a data culture. We're going to be in a new kind of company where the best ideas win based on the data. And so we give people a pretty simple rubric. We say, think really big, have a fantastic imagination, think big, Start small because change is painful. It's emotional for an organization. Start small and go fast. Fail fast, see what works, see what doesn't work, but go fast. Do not start these huge, programs that take years and years. Start small and go fast.
Game of inches.
John, can I add one more?
Absolutely.
Just, don't undermine the cultural change management. Shipyards, they're forever. The dates I see, and in fact, our shipyard, Newport News, is 136 years now. So change management is so important, organizational change management. How do you educate your employees who are always paper-based or whatever? We are master shipbuilders that never touched computer in the past. How do you bring that technology to them? So one of the things we did was, we didn't want them to come to a training grounds, in a training room. So we took 18-foot trailer and converted it. One side looks like a ship inside, and we would take the trailer inside the shipyard where the shipbuilders are and bring them in, and they look like they're in the ship. And that's how we train them. So training is very important when you're trying to roll out Industry 4.0 technology, because it's not going to happen automatically. You're going to have to go through that.
It is not about the technology. So, follow-on question. So, for Ian, I know you're working with both government and industry on digital transformations. What do you see as the differences in approaches between the two, and who's ready to go faster, government or industry?
I believe that's a loaded question. I think what I would observe is that the desire to accelerate and change is there on both sides. But industry is probably maybe less risk averse, and they're willing to make investments in the pursuit of productivity because it behooves them to do so. I mean, a lot of the big companies that originate these products that are military use, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, etc., they're all public companies, and so they responsibility to their customers, responsibility to their shareholders. So it's perhaps easier to convince someone to overhaul or modernize a business process in a factory if you can make a good business case for the return on that investment. It kind of becomes a no-brainer at that point. It's probably harder to do organizational change management in our government institutions, such as shipyards, because they've been established for a long time and people have been doing things a certain way for a long time. I just maybe see if my esteemed panel agrees with that or not.
Yeah. So with that, Bernard, Ian basically said industry's maybe got a little more agility here. Government's got a hard change management problem. Do you agree?
I really don't look at it that way. I read through your questions, John, and the way I look at it, and it's often after we've had a meeting with someone in the C-suite at one of our customers, and we're in the parking lot, and my colleagues will ask, "So, what do you think? Are they going to move forward?" And it all comes down to the mindset that you find in the leadership. Does the CEO, does he have a growth mindset or does he have a fixed mindset? Your people who are going to see the biggest impact, the welders, the pipe fitters, the electricians, those people are ready. We find that those people are ready. That you're going to have a talent problem here in the next 50 years. We're not going to have enough of those people, but they're more ready than the leadership. So the question I ask myself is, are they ready? Is determined by, is the leadership ready? Are they ready to lead? Are they ready to lead? And it doesn't matter where they sit, whether they're in government or they're in industry. We see both everywhere. We see both everywhere.
So Sven, sum it up in a minute. Do you agree with it? Do you agree with Ian, Bernard, or where are you on government and industry?
I see both sides. And the way I look at the organization is the top 2 to 3% are power driven. And the 95% is affiliation driven. Who am I going to work with? How does it change my day-to-day life? So I think if the top of the house sets the tone and motivates the team, they can move fast. I do see our industry clients, given the smaller size, are able to move a lot faster. I mean, for example, we were in the midst of a crisis in 2018, and it's a $50 billion company, and they wanted to set up an end-to-end supply chain digital twin. And the bill of materials was 6 levels deep. And within 4 months, we had the first prototype. And we had set up a whole command center with the first prototype of the entire value chain built. And we were able to harness all the tools, and we were able to set it up, and then we scaled it from there. We saw the prototype work. So there is a element of the leadership saying we're going to do it, and motivating the people to drive change.
Yeah. So as I stop here at the end of this segment, before I get on to what's the prize for winning, we've heard a lot about culture, change management, pick small things, not a big bang way forward. Questions from the audience? I know we have a question over here. Where's the microphone?
Thank
So I didn't get to ask this one last time. Hello, sirs. I'm Captain Andy Moeller, U.S. Navy retired and Navy League member. So I have 2 questions, and one of them is the digital twin or digital revolution 4.0. You're obviously looking at other industries that are doing this. Maybe they're U.S. or maybe they're not. I'd be interested to know where you find a lot of parallels, who's having success, and how you envision the shipyard of the future. I got to visit, I'm actually a supplier to Blue Origin, so I was really impressed looking at what they're doing with their own processes, building the new Glenn ship. Very few humans involved, very high pass with welding, tower welding. You guys are shaking your heads so you know about this. So what other industries are you looking at that have a lot of parallels that you can adopt, and maybe what pitfalls do they have? And then the other question I have is, how are our adversaries changing their shipyards? I got to visit the Dalian shipyard as part of ICAF years ago. It was 1995, so I'm sure a lot's changed. But I literally saw people barefoot carrying steel beams around. They're obviously cranking out ships big time. What are they doing to come up with their shipyards of the future?
I got it. So some industry examples and our adversaries. So I think Sven, I'm going to give me an industry example in a minute.
Yeah.
And then I think Bernard, I'm going to go to you. And then Ian, I'm going to give you the last word, because I think this is illustrative of these answers will be illustrative for what people are doing.
So
quick.
industry example, I would say heavy construction equipment, large industrial products. I mean, those are the closest examples because their bills of materials are deep. It's a lot of physical plus electronics and other equipment and fluids and chemicals all in one, right? So that's the closest example we see to shipyard. And the other thing is maintenance and overhaul, right? So that is, you could look at the maintenance and think of construction service, construction equipment as a service. They have to provide uptime to their customers. So that's a real close parallel in my mind to a shipyard. And they are enabling digital technologies. I mean, they have autonomous construction equipment now, right, which can do the mining on their own. And they come back in for service. You're collecting data real time through sensors and saying, my left track is overheating, right track's fine. I need to go change the bearings or lubricate the left tracks because they're overheating. And these are, 50, 100-ton equipment. So that would be my example.
Bernard, in a minute, give me a Microsoft where you see this as being implemented.
I guess the two most relevant places in aerospace and space is really a good place. But my 2 favorite places to go, with Admiral Corker, we talked about construction, commercial construction, especially a complex facility. healthcare facilities, manufacturing of semiconductors. These are systems of complexity, and they have to be operating while you're doing the upgrades, the improvements, and the maintenance. You don't ever get to shut them down. And then the other one, which is, I think is the closest one, which we've seen a lot of application of technology and a reduction in the actual workforce in operations and maintenance based on leveraging technology, is offshore operations for oil and gas. That's where we've seen that they have the same, in some cases, their challenges are harder because they don't ever get to bring it back. It goes out there and it's there for 30 years and it has to be maintained and upgraded and improved, and they get to move it around a little bit. But that's one of the toughest applications, and there's a lot of those out there in the world. And so I think there's a lot to learn from that industry.
Yeah, that's a great question. Ian, just give me a 30-second soundbite.
I guess one good news story then. I'm working on a project with the U.S. Marine Corps. It's called the AMOC, the Additive Manufacturing Operations Cell. And they've taken 3D scanned and 3D printed parts libraries out on deployments with them now. So they're taking packs with certain types of printers with certain capabilities for both nylon and metal, and they have an approved parts library which they're accessing in the secure cloud through PLM, and they have 1,100 Marines using that now for their maintenance operations, and they've been able to solve problems for certain types of parts that they find shortage of in the field, whether it be switches for radios, blanking caps, or tools to remove certain components from a military vehicle. So they're adapting very well, and they're taking some of this technology out to the edge and seeing real benefits from it. So there's some good news stories out there too.
Yeah. So to get to your last question with one panel member, I think I'm going to go to Bharat. Any insights to what our adversaries are doing in their yards?
Maybe not from shipyard perspective, but I would say, when you do Industry 4.0 or any digital transformation, remember you're making all this information in digital formats. It's easy to steal if you don't protect it, right? So we always have to have that, and Admiral mentioned that you got to make sure that cyber focus is there, because this is our national security, right? So we can't let any of that information go out. So we always look at it first from cyber. In fact, when we buy, we have a rule now, anytime we buy any equipment that has a power and a computer, it requires a cybersecurity oversight to understand what we're going to do with the data, how it's going to be protected. So if you're going to have operational technology network and all that, you got to make sure that you're protecting that very well. Example you were talking about, I'm surprised they didn't say to come look at HII, but we have great examples of some of the digital transformations we do. I'm not sure we can take you everywhere, but we got a lot of examples.
So let me get one more question from the audience.
Sorry, guys.
Hi, Mark Harris, Captain United States Navy, Supply Corps retired, and my last assignment was at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. So supply chain management is very close to my heart. We heard a lot about disconnected systems, and we understand that each shipyard is part of an ecosystem, but also they have a number of systems that work in itself independently. The question is, for SIOP, is there a plan to invest in a backbone to connect all those shipyards together so that we can effectively and efficiently utilize the supply chain resources, the resources of manpower and personnel, as well as allocation of monies, or even utilizing those shipyards for what we would call organic capability to build parts and make parts available for the entire ecosystem. Yeah. The other question would be, for the industry panelists, how would you implement that, and what would you see as the first steps to making that happen?
Mark, that's a great question. I'm gonna make it simple for Admiral Korka. Is there a plan to incorporate Industry 4.0 like technologies as we have to modernize the shipyards? We got to buy dry docks. We got to do cranes. We got to do. Where does this fit?
Yes, so of course, we can't be successful, as I mentioned, this ecosystem, there's a large dependency on the IT, and that's been sort of foot stomped by the industry members here. And so there's 3 lines of efforts for our optimization, okay? There's construction as one line of effort that's sort of a capacity and capability to support future platforms. The other is the optimization piece, and that optimization piece goes into the digital space with digital twins, life cycle maintenance, and yes, procurement and supply materials. So there actually is an IT framework that is a part of the entire plan. So yes, that is being considered in the design. And that's when I mentioned that we're taking a step back and looking at the holistic approach and the synchronization of everything. Supply is that. And the backbone is, of course, an IT framework.
So with that, go ahead, Sven.
The one thing that just came to mind, with the question is, how do you think about all of this as an entire ecosystem? Because historically, we've looked at supply chains as being linear, but you really have to start to think about it as an ecosystem and a network, because you have suppliers, and they have suppliers, and they have suppliers. If you can't think about and imagine it as a network, you're never going to have an orchestrated supply chain. So imagine for 5 minutes, you have your capacity and your supplier's capacity on blockchain. So you can allocate, I only have 100% of capacity. So who am I giving my capacity to? And their suppliers do the same, and their suppliers do the same. So until you get down to, I'm digging iron out of the ground, I have mapped my entire value chain, right? And that's when you can really start to optimize your ecosystem, because if you don't have one part, it's going to cause you hiccups down the line. You may not be able to refurbish the ship, or you may not be able to produce the ship, or you may not have a critical component that you need to complete the step. And in order to do that effectively in the future, you really have to start thinking about it as a network rather than a chain. So I think that's the biggest shift from my perspective.
That's a great perspective. So in the last closing minutes here, I'm going to hold a little bit of a rapid fire section on what do you get for winning? What's the prize? And so to the panel, and I'm going to step through and everybody can just give me a 30-second soundbite on an answer. If successful, what will commercial or public shipyards achieve implementing these new digital technologies through transformation and modernization? Ian.
They'll retain a younger, more engaged workforce that's happy to be there, and they'll also see increased throughput and industrial productivity.
Sven.
Concur. The other part I'm going to add is resiliency, because our supply chains are complex, and any shock anywhere tends to disrupt it. We're seeing it on our car supply. You can't go buy a new car right now without waiting 6 weeks.
Resiliency.
So you need resiliency in supply chain so that you can manage. So that's one thing you're going to get. The other thing you're going to get is you're going to get 30 to 40% productivity gains across your network. So those are my 2 points.
Bernard. 30 seconds.
Culture. I think the number one thing you're going to get, you do this right, you're going to get a better culture. And that's going to improve your safety, quality, productivity. And I agree with Ian. We're seeing in those early leaders double-digit gains.
Yeah. Bharat.
I would say, I would not repeat, but I would say that definitely quality and employee safety perspective. I would say time, Admiral talked about readiness, right? So time to market to get ships actually doing missions instead of sitting in a dock probably would be a big thing. And I would just say, overall ecosystem, I think government and industry can work together. They used to say that if you want to go fast, you go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. I think with Industrial Revolution and Industry 4.0, we can go fast and further as an ecosystem.
Fast, alone, farther together. I love that. Admiral Corker, just real quick, where do you think we
really
land?
Just from an output, increased ASABO, increased readiness.
Okay. Follow on. If the Navy embraces Industry 4.0 in its shipyard recap program, will it help create a process to insert new technology into maritime platforms, essentially letting the Navy be more agile over the ship's life cycle? Bharat, just give me a quick soundbite.
Yeah, I think, we all have gone through these program projects, right, that takes years. And I think we are adopting this agile methodology where you do sprints. I'm talking about technology side of the sprints, that we want to deliver things to our customers internally every 3 weeks and not give them 1-year deadlines, like we'll deliver something. So I would say just agile methodology would be a great way to go.
Ian, quick follow.
Can you repeat the question?
Can we get technology into ships faster?
We can and we are. I think you're starting to see it introduced now at the subsystem level, maybe not holistically at the ship or shipyards, but new platform modernization programs give us the opportunity to insert some of this technology, and I think we'll see more of it over time.
So I think we are out of time, and I'll close by thanking the panel, thanking you. I think we heard significant themes of what is it? It's not really all about the technology. There's a big cultural piece. Admiral Corker clearly indicated that there's a piece for this in the SIOP program, but it's a big, complex ecosystem, and it's going to take time to work out. So to my panel, thank you very much.